Okay, so for decades, you've probably heard this idea that, a single glass of wine with dinner might actually be good for you. But what if that was completely wrong? Today, we're diving into some surprising new science that is totally flipping our understanding of the link between alcohol and our brain health.
So that brings us to the big question, right? Is that daily drink you might be having actually helping your brain, or is it harming it? I think a lot of us have held on to that idea that a little bit could be beneficial. But it turns out the latest science has a very different and, honestly, a very surprising answer. And this all stems from what's been a really confusing health message for years. The signals from different studies have been all over the place, leaving most of us pretty unsure of what to believe. So on one side, you have this really common belief that light to moderate drinking might actually protect you from dementia. But then on the other side, you have this groundbreaking new research that finds that any amount of alcohol is linked to an increased risk. So how could these two ideas even exist at the same time? To get it, we really have to look at where that first idea came from. To really understand this shift, we've got to go back and look at the old evidence. See, that idea that a little bit of alcohol was good for you, it came almost entirely from one specific kind of research, observational studies. And those early studies gave us something that scientists called the U-shaped curve. If you look at this chart, you can see what I mean. The data seemed to show that people who didn't drink at all and people who drank heavily both had a higher risk of dementia. But the light drinkers, right there in the middle, they appeared to have the lowest risk. For decades, this was the evidence for a so-called protective effect. It looks pretty straightforward, doesn't it? But here's the million-dollar question. Why was this picture so misleading? What were these studies missing? Well, this quote from genetic engineer Shebnem Unlichler really hits the nail on the head. It turns out these observational studies had a really hard time separating the effects of the alcohol itself from everything else going on in a person's life. The data was being skewed by all these hidden factors. So let's just break down these hidden flaws. It turns out that light drinkers as a group often just have other healthy habits. They might exercise more, eat better, maybe they have stronger social lives. And here's the real kicker. That non-drinker group often included people who had quit drinking because they already had health problems. So that made the whole group look less healthy than it actually was. The real takeaway here, it probably wasn't the alcohol offering protection at all. It was all these other healthy lifestyle factors. So how in the world do scientists get around a problem like that? Well, they turned to a really powerful new tool that can cut right through all that noise of lifestyle choices: genetics.
Now, this method is actually pretty genius. Instead of just asking people how much they drink, which, let's be honest, isn't always reliable, researchers look at specific genetic markers we inherit that are linked to higher or lower alcohol consumption over a lifetime. And because these genes are inherited randomly, they're not tied to other choices, like whether you go to the gym or what you eat. It allows science to finally isolate the true effect of alcohol itself. And just like Shebnem Unlichler says here, this genetic approach gives us a much, much cleaner and more accurate picture of what's really going on between alcohol and our brains, completely free from all those confusing biases. So, what happened when scientists took this powerful genetic analysis and applied it to these massive data sets with hundreds of thousands of people? Well, that old U-shaped curve, it didn't just change a little bit. It completely vanished. And here it is. This is the big aha moment. The new evidence from genetic analysis shows a straight, clear line. The absolute lowest risk for dementia is at 0 alcohol, and from there, the risk just steadily increases with any amount of drinking. There's no dip, there's no protective sweet spot. So the conclusion here is really unavoidable. That whole protective effect was basically an illusion, kind of like a ghost in the data that was created by flawed studies. The reality is, your risk for dementia goes up as your alcohol intake goes up, starting from the very first drink. And you really can't overstate how important this is. As consultant neurologist Dr. Steve Alder puts it, this is a turning point. It's a game changer that completely shifts our understanding and suggests that, yeah, the public health message probably needs to change too. Okay, so we've gone through the science, but what does all of this actually mean for you and the choices you make every day? Let's get practical. So why exactly does alcohol increase this risk? Well, according to Dr. Alder, it harms the brain in a bunch of different ways.
First off, it's directly neurotoxic. That means it literally poisons and damages our brain cells. It also causes brain atrophy, and that's just a fancy way of saying brain shrinkage. Yikes. On a chemical level, it messes with the neurotransmitter systems that our brain cells need to talk to each other. And it also increases inflammation throughout the body, which we know is a major driver of all sorts of diseases. You really can't get any clearer than this advice from the study's lead author, Dr. Anya Tapiwala. She says, don't fool yourself into thinking moderate drinking is helping your brain. If your goal is to lower your dementia risk, the answer is simple: lower your alcohol consumption. And that really brings us to the final, crystal clear conclusion from all this new science. The absolute safest choice you can make to protect your brain for the long haul is to minimize, or even just avoid, alcohol entirely. So with all this new evidence showing that any amount of alcohol can increase dementia risk, the final question is really for you to think about. Is it time to rethink your happy hour? Thanks for tuning in.